Yeah, creepy ass kids in horror movies is something that will always send a shiver up our spines. And when you think about some of the scariest horror movies out there, you'll notice that most of them have one or more creepy kids in them. So on this episode of Nerd Space Horror, I'll be taking a look at every horror movie that I can think of and giving you guys the 10 kids that scared us the most in our favorite horror movies. Whether they are possessed, ghosts, or straight up just creepy looking, these 10 kids left us feeling very uneasy long after the movie ended. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Horror, and this is my top 10 scariest kids in horror movies. Let's get it. Number 10, Isaac Chroner, The Children of the Corn. Children of the Corn was one of the first films that I watched that immediately made me scared of creepy kids in horror movies. The movie follows a young couple who show up to a small town that has been taken over by the children of the town. As it turns out, these kids formed their own little cult and killed all of the parents in town. And the leader of said cult is none other than Isaac Chroner. While Malachi may be the most vicious of the two creepy kids in this film, Isaac is definitely the scarier and more intimidating character thanks to his connection to the god that they worship. Some of the things that make Isaac one of the creepier kids in a horror movie comes from his influence over the kids in this town, his calm yet terrifying demeanor, and the demonic-like possession that we see from him near the end of the film. Overall, Children of the Corn is one of the best examples of a film making kids terrifying in horror movies, especially in the case of Isaac. Number 9, Esther, the Orphan. Spoiler for those that haven't seen The Orphan or its prequel, but Esther is technically not a kid. However, that's something that we don't really learn until closer to the end of the first movie, as it's revealed to be a major twist for the film. For that reason, I'm going to include her on today's list regardless of her actual age. Anyway, after a family adopts Esther, weird things begin to happen. Esther begins to act violently, especially towards the mother, and it appears that she's not the same innocent kid that they thought she was when they adopted her. As it turns out, Esther is in fact not a kid, but a grown woman with a disease that makes her look much younger than she actually is. Esther's obsession with the father pushes her to whatever it takes to keep him to herself, to the point where she'll commit murder, frame others, and use her innocent look to her advantage. Number 8, Annabelle Creation. When we think about Annabelle, we immediately think of the possessed doll that we've seen multiple times throughout the Conjuring universe. However, before the name Annabelle became infamous with a possessed doll, she was a normal young girl that died in an accident. Her parents then became obsessed with reaching out to Annabelle that they began contacting a spirit that they believed to be their deceased daughter Annabelle. Over time, however, they learned that this was in fact a demon that was using Annabelle's likeness to manipulate the poor couple to get access to our reality. After realizing this was not their daughter but a demon, the couple locked away the doll that belonged to Annabelle in an effort to prevent the demon from causing any more harm to them. Years later, they opened their home to orphan girls only to then give the demon exactly what it wanted, a vessel. From here, the demon continued to use Annabelle's likeness to create some of the most terrifying jump scares seen throughout the franchise, making Annabelle Creation one of the most terrifying movies in the Conjuring universe. All thanks to the little Annabelle herself. Number 7, Toshio, The Grudge. Obviously, the scariest part of the Grudge movies and its Japanese counterpart is without a doubt Saeki. She's the one that the movies mainly focus on, and her iconic voice is what really sends a shiver up our spines as we are watching these films. With that being said, her son doesn't get enough attention. Toshio is the other victim of the film that becomes a ghost thanks to the brutal murder of him and his mother. In his case, he was drowned by his father alongside his cat in the bathtub. Because of this, we see sequences in which Toshio can't talk but instead makes cat noises when he opens his mouth. His pale ghost-like skin, sinister like stares, and the creepy sounds that he makes when he opens his mouth are enough reasons for him to earn a spot on today's list. Number 6, Gage, Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary follows a family that moves into a new home in which their son, Gage, is killed after walking into the middle of a nearby highway. After his death, the family became extremely depressed, but the father, thanks to him bringing back his family cat, Church, knows of a way he could potentially get his son back. He buries Gage at the pet cemetery and Gage returns, but he's definitely not the same innocent boy that they lost in the accident. Instead, he's a violent and dangerous boy that only thinks about one thing: murder. First, he kills a neighbor that he became close to as a human boy, and then he manipulates his mother into coming home, in which he kills her too. He attempts to torment and kill his father as well before his father finally puts him down for good. Gage is one of the best bite-sized villains seen in a horror movie, and it's actually really impressive how terrifying this little boy is in Pet Sematary. Number 5, Georgie, It. While Pennywise is definitely the scariest part of the It reboot movies thanks to Bill Skarsgård's performance, another character that deserves some credit for scaring the hell out of us in this reboot is Georgie himself. After losing his life to Pennywise, Georgie becomes a key asset to Pennywise as the clown from hell uses his likeness to torment the Losers Club in various ways while also terrifying them, increasing their fear, which is what he feeds on. Outside of the opening sequence in which Georgie is killed by Pennywise, probably the most intense moment featuring Georgie is when Pennywise is physically using him as a puppet in a flooded basement. After Ben recognizes Georgie in the back of the basement, Georgie begins repeating the iconic phrase, "You'll float too." With each time he says this, Georgie's voice gets more and more demonic as his face rots away. At the same time, Pennywise rises from the water, showcasing the fact that his hand is inside of Georgie and he's using Georgie as a corpse puppet. Yeah, that was a pretty intense and terrifying scene to watch. Number 4, Doris, Ouija Origin of Evil. Ouija Origin of Evil is one of the most underrated horror movies I've ever seen. For some reason, it doesn't really get enough recognition that I believe it deserves. Sure, the plot of the movie is both predictable and boring, but if you're looking for a good scare, then this movie will probably scratch that itch. And the best parts of this film is definitely Doris, played by the one and only Lulu Wilson. If this name doesn't sound familiar, then just know that she's become a rising star in horror movies. She's also appeared in Annabelle Creation, another movie that showed up on today's list. Anyway, her performance as Doris was top notch, as every time she was on screen from the moment that she became possessed, us the viewers were scared shitless of her. From demonic voices, creepy ass smiling, and crawling on the walls and ceilings, Doris is one of the best possessed little girls in a horror movie. Number 3, Damien the Omen. As the son of Satan and the Antichrist, clearly Damien Thorn has everything set up for him to be one of the most terrifying kids in horror movies. From the moment that he is born, Damien replaces the son of a high-ranking political figure. This was ultimately done on purpose in order to give Damien the best chance to gain power once he became of age and eventually run for president. Until then, however, as Damien grows older, he begins tormenting his family while also causing tragedies to happen all around him. First, one of his nannies commits suicide in his honor. Then, a hellhound comes into his life and becomes his guardian dog. Also, the new nanny becomes a worshipper of his and does whatever she needs to do in order to protect him from harm, knowing what he is to become, including murdering his own mother. While Damien really doesn't do much in the first movie himself, his constant presence throughout the film and his evil smile as each thing goes his way is something that definitely leaves us with goosebumps every time we rewatch The Omen. Number 2, Regan, The Exorcist. Most would argue that Regan should be the number 1 entry on today's list, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you for putting her as your number 1 scariest kid in a horror movie. For me personally though, there's one other entry that scares me a lot more than Regan does. Anyway, looking at the original Exorcist movie, Regan was absolutely terrifying. In the later half of the movie, we see some truly terrifying shit from Regan as she becomes fully possessed and becomes a demon version of a little girl later in the film. Every little thing that Regan does as a possessed girl is horrifying, and she's easily the scariest possessed kid in a horror movie. Doris might be pretty terrifying in Ouija, but she's got nothing on the original scary possessed little girl, and Linda Blair does an amazing job with her performance of Regan in The Exorcist. Before we get to the number 1 spot on today's list though, check out these 4 honorable mentions of creepy ass kids in horror movies that just barely missed out on the top 10.
What have you been putting inside me? Medicine to make you feel better. Lie! Holy water. Holy water. Injections for tetanus roots. Suppression medication while she worked on your genes. What am I? What am I? You're her son.
We need to learn healthier ways of resolving conflict, Emily.
Most families don't even know they have a problem.
Until it's too late.
What are you doing, you silly pumpkin head? You don't want me to come under there and get you, do you? I'm gonna count to 3. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 3.
Number 1, Samara, The Ring. Samara Morgan, also known as Sadako in Rangu, is the main antagonist of the Ring franchise. As a young girl born from violence, Samara came into this world with psychic abilities that allowed her to force horrifying thoughts into people and animals around her. This ultimately led to her adoptive mother, Anna, going insane and killing her at the young age of 8. Despite Samara being terrifying as a young girl with horrifying abilities, she was much more dangerous dead. As a ghost, she created a videotape that would curse anybody that watches this tape. Unless they were to copy this tape and show it to someone else, Samara would show up and murder them in a pretty gruesome way. Most of the time that we see Samara in her ghost form, her face is covered by her hair. But over time, we eventually get to see a revengeful and angry zombie-like face on Samara when she makes her final kill at the end of the first movie. Samara is one of the most terrifying kids in a horror movie to this day, even all of these years later. What makes her even more intimidating than most characters on this list is that she doesn't really ever lose. She continues to get her way and she continues to spread her curse in different ways over time. It's downright terrifying what she manages to accomplish long after she's dead. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Horror. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Samara Morgan the most terrifying kid in a horror movie, or is there someone else that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more horror movie content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Horror. Take care.